pier buzzed with energy as the luxurious ocean jewel prepared to set sail. Towering above the water like a gleaming palace, the ship promised 2 weeks of indulgence for the wealthy elite. It also promised opportunity for an ambitious group of criminals. Ian adjusted the crisp white collar of his steward's uniform, his sharp eyes scanning the crowd. The other members of the team, each posing as a different member of the ship's crew, blended seamlessly into the controlled chaos of boarding. "Everyone's in position," Ian murmured into the discreet earpiece hidden beneath his cap. "Copy that," came the reply from Mara, his partner in crime. She was stationed at the boarding ramp, dressed as a security officer, inspecting passengers' tickets with a practiced smile. Behind her, Ethan, the muscle of their operation, hauled suitcases onto the conveyor belt like a seasoned porter. Every now and then, he subtly tagged specific luggage, items belonging to high-value passengers they had identified from the guest list stolen weeks prior. "This is too smooth," Ethan muttered under his breath, grinning despite himself. "Focus," Ian snapped, his tone sharp but quiet. "We have one shot at this. No mistakes." As the last of the guests boarded, the massive ship gave a low groan, its engines rumbling to life. Mara peeled away from her post and joined Ian in a service corridor below deck. The air was thick with the scent of cleaning agents and salt water. "Stage one's done," Mara said, pulling her hair out of the tight bun she'd worn as part of her disguise. "Any issues?" Ian shook his head. "None. Ethan's tagging the Mark's luggage. Clara's set up in the control room, and Devin's rigging the lifeboat. Everything's on schedule." The plan was deceptively simple. Infiltrate the ocean jewel, identify and rob the wealthiest passengers, then escape under the cover of darkness using a modified lifeboat equipped with a speedboat motor and a GPS tracker. What made it complex was the sheer scale of the ship and the need to blend in among its sprawling crew and guests. Mara smirked. 2 weeks surrounded by champagne and millionaires. Almost makes me wish we weren't here to work. Ian allowed himself a brief smile. "Stick to the plan, and maybe you'll get a vacation after this." Later that evening, the grand ballroom shimmered with golden light. Guests in designer evening wear mingled beneath glittering chandeliers as a string quartet played softly in the corner. Ian moved among the tables, refilling glasses of champagne with a practiced hand. His target, a gray-haired man in a tailored tuxedo, laughing with a group of similarly wealthy companions. "That's Gerald Bannister," Ian whispered into his earpiece. "Chief Executive Officer of Bannister Pharmaceuticals. Estimated net worth, $1.2 billion. He's got a suite on deck 9. Mara, you're up." "On it," Mara replied. Elsewhere, Mara, now dressed as a housekeeper, swiped her master key card and slipped into Bannister's suite. She moved quickly, her gloved hands rifling through drawers and luggage. She found several luxury watches, a stack of cash, and a velvet case containing diamond cufflinks. "Bannister's traveling light," Mara muttered. "Looks like the real haul is probably in a safety deposit box on board." "Noted," Ian replied. "Get out before anyone sees you." Mara exited the room, closing the door softly behind her. She had just rounded the corner when she spotted a security officer heading in her direction. Thinking fast, she adjusted the cleaning cart she was pushing, pretending to be absorbed in rearranging towels. "Evening," the officer said, nodding as he passed. "Evening," Mara replied, her voice calm. The officer didn't stop, and Mara let out a breath of relief as she moved on. Down in the lower levels of the ship, Devin tinkered with the lifeboat. The once standard vessel was now fitted with a hidden compartment large enough to store the stolen goods. Devin had also installed a small motor powerful enough to carry them miles away from the ship, where a second team would be waiting to extract them. "How's it looking?" Ethan's voice came through the comms. "Almost ready," Devin replied. "I'll need another hour to make sure it's good to go. How's the luggage haul?" Ethan chuckled. "You wouldn't believe the stuff these people pack. Designer everything. I tagged 5 bags so far. Once we're in their rooms, it'll be like Christmas morning." "Stay sharp," Ian interrupted. "We're not out of the woods yet." By the time the ship set course for its first destination, the plan was already unfolding seamlessly. Ian had identified 5 primary targets, each of them among the wealthiest passengers on board. Mara and Ethan worked in tandem to access their rooms, stealing only what could be carried discreetly, but Ian's instincts told him to remain cautious. A ship like the Ocean Jewel didn't just cater to the wealthy, it also employed top-tier security. Any slip-up could spell disaster. As the night wore on, Ian found himself on the observation deck, staring out at the endless expanse of water. The storm clouds on the horizon mirrored the unease in his gut. Mara's voice crackled in his ear. "You okay, boss?" "Fine," Ian said. "Just making sure we're ready for whatever comes next." Mara hesitated before replying. "We're going to pull this off. You know that, right?" Ian didn't answer. Instead, he turned back toward the glittering lights of the ship, his resolve hardening. "Let's just stick to the plan." The Ocean Jewel cruised through the open sea, its passengers blissfully unaware of the scheme, unfolding beneath their feet. Morning sunlight poured into the lavish dining hall, where a breakfast buffet of exotic fruits, pastries, and gourmet dishes was spread out like a feast. The air buzzed with casual chatter, laughter, and the clinking of champagne glasses. Ian moved among the tables, clearing plates and refilling drinks with the air of a seasoned steward. His eyes flicked to Gerald Bannister, who was engrossed in conversation with a younger man. Bannister gestured animatedly, the diamond cufflinks on his sleeves catching the light. "Mara," Ian whispered into his earpiece, his voice barely audible over the din. "Bannister's cufflinks. He's wearing them at breakfast. We'll need to grab them another way." "Got it," Mara replied from her position near the entrance, where she posed as a hostess. "Ethan and I can create a distraction later. What's next on your end?" "Deck 5, Art Gallery," Ian said. "There's a private exhibit of rare pieces. Several passengers have safes in their suites for the art they've purchased. I'll scout it out after breakfast." Down on Deck 2, Ethan stood in the storage room where passengers' tagged luggage was kept. The room was filled with rows of suitcases, trunks, and garment bags, many bearing designer labels. Ethan had already identified the luggage belonging to Bannister and two other high-profile targets. Clara's voice crackled in his earpiece. "You've got about 10 minutes before the security cameras sweep the room again. Find what you need and get out." Ethan smirked, kneeling beside a sleek black suitcase he had tagged earlier. "Plenty of time. These people really trust the ship's staff, don't they?" He carefully unzipped the suitcase, revealing neatly packed clothing, toiletries, and a small leather pouch. Inside were 3 thick bundles of cash in foreign currencies, a set of gold cufflinks, and a necklace with an emerald pendant. "Jackpot," Ethan muttered. He photographed the contents before zipping the bag back up and moving to the next piece of luggage. This one contained a collection of luxury watches. Ethan whistled softly, pocketing the most valuable one. 2 minutes, Clara warned. "Heading out," Ethan replied, shutting the suitcase and slipping out of the storage room just as the cameras came back online. Meanwhile, Ian wandered the art gallery on Deck 5, blending in with the small crowd admiring the collection. The room was filled with priceless paintings, sculptures, and antiques, each displayed under protective glass cases. Ian's target was a tall, elegant woman in her 40s, wearing a red evening gown. She stood in front of a painting, speaking softly to a curator. Ian's intel identified her as Helena Carlyle, a prominent art collector and one of the wealthiest passengers on board. "She's the one," Ian murmured into his earpiece. "Carlyle's suite will have a safe for any purchases she makes here. Mara, you'll need to get inside after she leaves for dinner tonight." "Consider it done," Mara replied. As the curator escorted Carlyle to another piece, Ian lingered near the painting she had been admiring. It was a serene landscape worth millions. He leaned closer, studying the security system surrounding it. "Top-tier motion sensors," he said quietly. "No way to take it without setting off alarms. We'll focus on her suite instead." That evening, the team convened in their hidden workspace deep within the ship's lower levels. The room, disguised as a maintenance closet, was cluttered with tools and equipment for their operation. "Here's the update," Ian began, spreading a map of the ship on the table. "Bannister, Carlyle, and a third target, William Torres, a tech billionaire. We hit their suites tonight. Mara and Ethan, you'll handle Bannister. Clara, keep the cameras off for a 5-minute window. Devon, is the lifeboat ready?" "Almost," Devon replied, tightening a bolt on a piece of machinery. "It'll be good to go by the end of the night." "Perfect," Ian said. "We hit the suites at staggered intervals to avoid suspicion. Clara, make sure the cameras come back online as soon as we're out. We don't want anyone realizing they were down." What about the passengers? Mara asked. If any of them come back early, we're toast. Leave that to me, Ian said, his voice firm. I'll keep an eye on the dining room and steer them away if needed. Just stick to the plan. Hours later, the ship's grand dining hall came alive with the sound of a live jazz band and the clinking of wine glasses. Ian watched from his position near the bar, his sharp eyes scanning the crowd. Bannister and Carlyle were both present, enjoying the evening's festivities. Mara, you're clear, Ian said into his earpiece. Bannister won't be leaving anytime soon. On my way, Mara replied. In Bannister's suite, Mara moved quickly and quietly. She found his safe tucked behind a framed painting and used a compact device to hack the digital lock. Inside, she discovered a stash of diamonds, a wad of cash, and several documents. Got it, she whispered. Ethan stood guard outside the suite, keeping an eye on the hallway. Hurry up. We've got less than a minute before the cameras come back. Done, Mara said, slipping out of the room just as the camera lights flickered back on. Down in the control room, Clara monitored the ship's systems with a steady hand. She toggled the camera feeds, ensuring her team's movements went unnoticed. Her heart pounded as she heard footsteps approaching. Devon, we've got a problem, Clara whispered. Security's heading your way. Let them come, Devon replied, tightening one last bolt on the lifeboat's motor. This thing's ready. We just need to load it up. The ocean swayed gently beneath the Ocean Jewel as the night deepened, the passengers engrossed in luxurious dinners and evening entertainment. For Ian and his team, however, the clock was ticking. Each minute brought them closer to either success or disaster. Down in the storage hold, Ethan and Devon were busy preparing the stolen items for transport. The lifeboat sat in the shadows, its hidden compartments open, waiting to be filled. The haul so far was impressive. Diamonds, watches, rare coins, and more. Think this'll be enough to retire on? Ethan asked, hefting a small but heavy bag of loose diamonds into the lifeboat. Devon shrugged. Depends on how long you plan on living large. Me? I'd rather stay under the radar. Where's the fun in that? Ethan shot back, grinning. Before Devon could reply, Clara's voice came through their earpieces, calm but urgent. Heads up, guys. I'm picking up unusual activity on Deck 7. Security is holding an unscheduled meeting. It might not be about us, but stay sharp. Ethan swore under his breath. What's the play, Ian? Stick to the plan, Ian replied from his post near the dining hall. No signs they're on to us yet. Clara, keep monitoring their communications. Let me know if they mention anything specific. Will do, Clara confirmed. On Deck 9, Mara approached the suite of their third target, William Torres. A tech billionaire known for his eccentricity, Torres had opted for a private dinner in his room rather than join the other passengers in the dining hall. This made things trickier. Mara glanced at the watch on her wrist. Ian, Torres is still in his suite. I can't go in with him there. Ian's voice crackled in her ear. He's got to leave eventually. Stay nearby but out of sight. We'll adapt if we need to. As she lingered in the hallway, Mara noticed the faint sound of a conversation coming from inside Torres' suite. He wasn't alone. I hear two voices, she whispered. Could be security or just a guest. Either way, I can't risk it. Ian paused before responding. Fall back for now. We'll regroup once the other items are secured. In the ship's control room, Clara monitored the camera feeds, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she overrode security protocols to create blind spots for her team. A bead of sweat trickled down her temple as she kept one ear on the ship's internal communications. Something's up, she muttered into the comms. Security just mentioned Deck 2 storage. Ethan, that's your area. Perfect timing, Ethan said sarcastically. We're almost done here. Can you stall them? I'll try, Clara replied. Devon, get the lifeboat prepped. We might need to move faster than planned. Ian, still in the dining hall, noticed a subtle change in the air. A group of security officers entered the room, scanning the crowd. His pulse quickened. Mara, how's Torres' suite looking? Ian asked, trying to sound calm. No change, Mara replied. He's still in there, and I'm out of options. Forget Torres for now, Ian said. Get back to the staging area. We'll work with what we've got. What about you? Mara asked. I'll keep the heat off you, Ian replied. Ethan and Devon worked quickly, loading the last of the stolen goods into the lifeboat. The faint sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor outside the storage room, growing louder. We've got company, Devon said, his voice low. Ethan grabbed a crowbar from a nearby toolbox, holding it ready. Let them come. I'll handle it. Don't be stupid, Devon hissed. If they find us here, the whole operation's blown. The footsteps stopped just outside the door. Ethan and Devon exchanged a tense glance as the handle turned. The door opened and a security guard stepped inside, his flashlight sweeping the room. What are you doing down here? The guard demanded, his eyes narrowing. Ethan stepped forward, slipping into the role of a porter. Just wrapping up inventory, sir. Is there a problem? The guard frowned, clearly suspicious. This area's off limits right now. You're not supposed to be here. Devon, thinking fast, picked up a clipboard from a nearby table. We got clearance from the chief steward, he said smoothly. She wanted us to double-check the passenger luggage inventory before tomorrow's docking. The guard hesitated, his hand hovering near his radio. If you'd like, we can call her down to confirm, Ethan added, keeping his tone respectful but firm. After a tense moment, the guard sighed. Just finish up quickly and leave. Of course, Devon said, nodding. The guard exited, and Devon let out a long breath. That was close, he muttered. Too close, Ethan agreed. Let's finish this and get out of here. Back on deck 9, Mara retreated to the elevator, her nerves fraying. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. Clara, any updates on Torres? Mara asked. He just left his suite, Clara replied. He's heading to the casino. Finally, Mara said, turning back toward Torres's room. Be quick, Ian warned. Security's tightening up all over the ship. Mara moved swiftly, using her master key card to enter the suite. She found the safe behind a panel in the wall and set to work cracking it. Inside, she discovered several bundles of cash, a small pouch of uncut gemstones, and a gold watch engraved with Torres's initials. Got it, Mara said, slipping the items into her bag. Good, now get to the staging area, Ian instructed. By the time the team regrouped in the storage hold, tensions were running high. Security's breathing down our necks, Clara said, joining them. We need to launch the lifeboat now. Ian nodded. Load everything up. We'll make our move as soon as the cameras cycle. Devon fired up the lifeboat's motor, the low hum barely audible over the distant rumble of the ship's engines. Once we're clear of the ship, we rendezvous with the second team, Ian said. No stops, no delays. The Ocean Jewel sailed onward through the moonlit sea, its course steady despite the brewing tension aboard. In the shadows of the storage hold, Ian and his team finalized their preparations for the escape. Clara, you've got the security cameras, Ian asked, his voice sharp with urgency. Yeah, but it's dicey, Clara replied, seated at a makeshift terminal. I can loop the feeds for exactly 6 minutes. After that, it's out of my hands. They'll notice something's wrong if I push longer. Ian nodded. 6 minutes is enough. Mara, Ethan, be ready to move the moment Devon fires up the lifeboat. Mara tightened the strap of her bag, her face determined. Let's do this. Ethan, always the joker, gave a mock salute. Ready to sail the high seas, Captain. Devon rolled his eyes. Just make sure you don't get us caught, genius. As the team worked, Clara's earpiece crackled with an unexpected voice. This is security control. We've detected irregular activity in the lower decks. Dispatching officers to investigate. Her blood ran cold. Guys, we've got a problem, she whispered. Security's sending people down to deck 2. They're close. Ian's jaw tightened. How long do we have? Minutes, maybe less, Clara replied. Devon, is the lifeboat ready? Ian demanded. Ready and waiting, Devon said, stepping into the boat and starting its concealed engine. Good, everyone, load up, Ian ordered. The team moved swiftly, transferring their stolen haul into the lifeboat's hidden compartments. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed down the corridor outside, growing louder with each second. Mara, Ethan, get inside, Ian hissed, waving them into the boat. As the two climbed aboard, Clara joined Ian at the storage room entrance, her laptop tucked under one arm. I'll stall them as long as I can, she said. Ian shook his head. Number, you're coming with us. Before Clara could protest, the storage room door burst open. 2 security guards stepped inside, flashlights sweeping the space. Hey, what are you doing here? One of them barked. Ian stepped forward, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. Just checking the equipment. We didn't mean to cause any trouble. The guard narrowed his eyes. This area is restricted. Who authorized you to be here? Thinking fast, Ian gestured to a clipboard on a nearby table. The chief steward sent us. We're inspecting the lifeboats for tomorrow's safety drill. The second guard frowned, stepping closer. Where's your ID? Before Ian could respond, Ethan leaned out of the lifeboat, holding a wrench. Is there a problem here? We're on a tight schedule. The guards exchanged a glance, their suspicion deepening. Clara, sensing the danger, stepped forward. Look, we're just doing our jobs. If there's an issue, let's call the steward and clear it up. One of the guards reached for his radio. Stay where you are. We're verifying this now. As the guards turned away, Ian acted. With a swift motion, he struck the nearest one on the back of the head, knocking him out cold. Ethan followed suit, disarming the second guard before he could call for backup. Not how I wanted this to go, Ian muttered, lowering the unconscious guard to the floor. Time to move, Clara said, her voice urgent. The team scrambled into the lifeboat as Devon powered up the engine. The boat slid out of its concealed hatch and into the open sea, leaving the Ocean Jewel behind. The lifeboat sped across the waves, its small motor muffled to avoid detection. Ian sat at the helm, his eyes scanning the horizon for their rendezvous point. How far to the extraction team? Mara asked, her tone anxious. 10 minutes, maybe less, Ian replied. Ethan leaned back, a satisfied grin on his face. I'd say that went pretty well, all things considered. Clara shot him a withering look. Pretty well? We almost got caught. But we didn't, Ethan countered. And look at this haul. Mara rolled her eyes. Save the celebration until we're on dry land. As the lifeboat approached the rendezvous point, the team spotted a larger vessel waiting in the distance. The ship's lights were dimmed, and its crew stood ready to pull the lifeboat aboard. Ian slowed the engine as they neared, guiding the boat alongside the ship. A rope ladder was lowered, and the team climbed aboard one by one. Welcome aboard, said a man in a captain's hat, his voice tinged with amusement. Looks like you had an eventful night. You have no idea, Ian replied, shaking the man's hand. Once the stolen goods were secured in the ship's hold, the team gathered on deck, the adrenaline of their escape still coursing through them. We did it, Mara said, a small smile breaking through her usual composure. For now, Ian said, but this isn't over. We've got to lay low until the heat dies down. Ethan clinked an imaginary glass in the air. To a job well done. Clara sighed, her expression serious. Let's just hope it stays that way. As the ship disappeared into the night, the Ocean Jewel continued on its course, the passengers and crew oblivious to the heist that had taken place. For Ian and his team, the thrill of victory was tempered by the knowledge that their escape was only the beginning. Would their success lead to freedom, or had they merely delayed the inevitable? The smuggler's ship cut through the dark waves like a ghost, heading for a remote cove where Ian's team would transfer their stolen goods to waiting vehicles. The haul was impressive, millions in jewels, watches, and other valuables. But the team wasn't celebrating just yet. In the ship's dimly lit cabin, Ian studied a nautical chart spread across a table. Devon stood nearby, adjusting the ship's course on the autopilot. How far to the cove? Ian asked. 3 hours, give or take, Devon replied. We'll hit shallow waters just before dawn. Ian nodded. Good. We stick to the plan, offload the goods, split up, and regroup once it's safe. Devon hesitated. You think the crew will hold up their end of the deal? They've got no reason not to, Ian said. They're professionals, just like us. Devon didn't look convinced. Below deck, Mara, Clara, and Ethan inspected the hull, ensuring everything was accounted for. The lifeboat's compartments had done their job, keeping the valuables secure even in the rough sea. Looks like everything's intact, Mara said, zipping up a duffel bag filled with jewelry. Ethan held up a diamond necklace, letting the light catch the stones. Think we could keep a souvenir? Just one piece? Not a chance, Clara said, snatching the necklace from him. Every item gets sold or fenced. No loose ends. Always the buzzkill, Ethan muttered, but he handed over the necklace without further protest. Mara smirked. You'd think he'd learn by now. As the ship neared the cove, Ian called the team together on deck. The moon had dipped below the horizon, leaving them in near total darkness. All right, listen up, Ian said. This is the final stretch. We unload the goods into the trucks, and then we're out. No mistakes, no delays. Ethan raised a hand mockingly. And what happens if the trucks aren't there? They'll be there, Ian said firmly. And if they're not, Ethan pressed, then we improvise, Mara cut in. Like always, Ethan shrugged. Just asking. The ship slowed as it approached the cove, its engine barely a whisper in the pre-dawn quiet. The crew worked quickly to lower the stolen goods onto a waiting dinghy, which Devon and Ethan piloted to the shore. Ian, Mara, and Clara followed in a second dinghy, keeping watch for any signs of trouble. The cove was remote, surrounded by steep cliffs and dense forest, but Ian couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Clara, anything on the comms? Ian asked. Clara adjusted her portable scanner, which she'd rigged to pick up nearby radio frequencies. Nothing so far. If the cops are out here, they're staying quiet. Let's hope it stays that way, Ian said. On the shore, two black SUVs waited, their engines idling. A man in a leather jacket stepped out of the lead vehicle, his face shadowed by the dim light. Right on time, he said as the team approached. You've got the payment? Ian asked, his tone cautious. The man nodded, gesturing to a briefcase in his hand. Cash, as agreed. You've got the goods? Ian motioned for Devon to open one of the duffel bags. The man examined the contents briefly, his expression unreadable. Looks good, he said. Let's load up. As the team and the crew transferred the stolen items into the SUVs, Clara kept a watchful eye on the surrounding area. Something felt off, though she couldn't put her finger on it. Do you hear that? She asked, her voice low. Hear what? Ethan replied, glancing around. Clara shook her head. Never mind. Probably just the wind. With the goods loaded and the payment secured, Ian turned to the man in the leather jacket. We're done here, Ian said. You didn't see us, and we didn't see you. Understood, the man replied, climbing back into his SUV. The vehicles disappeared into the forest, their taillights fading into the darkness. As the team made their way back to the ship, Ian couldn't shake the feeling that their luck was running out. We should have gone with the trucks, he muttered. What's done is done, Mara said. The job's over. Let's focus on getting out of here. Ian nodded, but the knot in his stomach remained. Back aboard the smuggler's ship, the crew set course for international waters, where the team would be dropped off with their share of the payment. Ethan leaned against the railing, watching the horizon. Think we'll ever pull off something like this again? Mara shrugged. If we're lucky, we won't have to. Clara crossed her arms. I'm not counting on luck. We need to lay low for a while, maybe even disappear. Ian stared out at the water, his expression grim. This life doesn't come with guarantees, but for now, we're clear. That's all that matters. The first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon as the ship sailed into open water, leaving the cove and the danger behind. For Ian and his team, the heist had been a success, but the future was uncertain. Would their past eventually catch up with them, or had they managed to outsmart the odds one last time? The smuggler's ship glided across the tranquil sea, heading for a remote drop point where Ian's team would disembark. Below deck, the air was thick with a mix of relief and suspicion. They had pulled off an audacious heist, but the journey wasn't over. Tension simmered beneath the surface. In the ship's galley, Ian leaned over a small table, the briefcase of cash in front of him. Mara and Clara sat opposite, while Ethan paced the room. We should count it, Ethan said, breaking the silence. We will, Ian replied calmly. But first we need to talk. Clara raised an eyebrow. Talk about what? Trust, Ian said, his voice low but firm. Mara crossed her arms. This isn't the time for a team-building exercise, Ian. It's not an exercise, Ian shot back. Something about this whole operation doesn't sit right with me. From the moment we hit the shore, I've had a bad feeling. Ethan stopped pacing. A bad feeling? That's what we're basing this on? Ian ignored him, focusing on Clara. You're our tech expert. Did you pick up anything unusual on the comms? Clara hesitated. I thought I heard something earlier, but there was no confirmation. Just static. Static can mean interference, Ian said, or it could mean someone's listening. Devon entered the galley, wiping his hands on a rag. Engines are running smooth. What's the issue? We're trying to figure out if there's a mole, Ethan said, throwing his hands up dramatically. Devon frowned. A mole? In this crew? Ian nodded. Think about it. The guards were on us quicker than they should have been. And that buyer? He wasn't nervous enough for someone dealing with stolen goods worth millions. Mara leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. You think he tipped someone off? Maybe, Ian said. Or maybe someone on this ship has their own agenda. The room fell silent as everyone exchanged wary glances. All right, Ethan said, breaking the tension. Let's say you're right. What do we do about it? We keep our guard up, Ian said. And we don't let that cash out of our sight. Clara nodded. Agreed. Until we're off this boat, we treat everyone as a potential threat. Devon sighed. Great. Paranoia. That's just what we need. Later that night, as the team prepared to sleep, Ian stood watch over the briefcase. The ship's creaks and groans filled the air, but his focus remained sharp. He didn't trust the smuggler's crew, or anyone else for that matter. His thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Mara stepped inside, her expression grim. We've got a problem, she said. What is it? Ian asked, standing up. It's Ethan. He's missing. Ian and Mara searched the ship, their unease growing with each empty room. Finally, they found Ethan on the upper deck, leaning against the railing with a cigarette in hand. What the hell are you doing up here? Mara demanded. Ethan shrugged. Couldn't sleep. Thought I'd get some fresh air. We're supposed to stick together, Ian said, his tone stern. Ethan took a drag of his cigarette, his expression unreadable. Relax. I wasn't planning to jump ship. Mara narrowed her eyes. Maybe not, but you're making yourself a target. If there's a mole, they'll see you as an easy mark. Ethan flicked the cigarette into the sea. I can handle myself. As they returned below deck, Ian pulled Mara aside. Keep an eye on him, Ian said. You think he's the mole? Mara asked. I don't know, Ian admitted, but I'm not taking any chances. The next morning, the ship reached the drop point, a desolate stretch of coastline far from prying eyes. The smuggler's crew helped offload the team's gear, including the briefcase of cash. As Ian supervised the operation, Clara approached him, her face pale. I checked the comms again, she said quietly. There was interference. A lot of it. Someone's been tracking us. Ian's jaw tightened. Did you trace it? Clara nodded. It's coming from the buyer's people. Ian gathered the team in a secluded spot on the shore. The buyer sold us out, he said bluntly. They're tracking us, which means they're probably planning to ambush us. What do we do? Mara asked. We split up, Ian said. Take different routes and regroup at the safe house. Devon frowned. And the cash? I'll take it, Ian said. It's safer if we don't put all our eggs in one basket. As the team dispersed into the forest, Ian shouldered the briefcase and started down a narrow trail. His mind raced with possibilities. If the buyer's people were tracking them, they wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted. Suddenly, a rustling in the bushes made him freeze. He turned, his hand on his weapon, but it was only Mara. I thought we were splitting up, Ian said. I don't trust you with the money, Mara said bluntly. Ian smirked. Fair enough. The two moved cautiously through the forest, their senses heightened. The distant sound of a helicopter made Ian glance up, but the thick canopy blocked his view. We need to keep moving, Ian said. Mara nodded, her grip tightening on her weapon. Let's hope the others make it. As they reached the edge of the forest, the faint sound of voices made them stop. Ian motioned for Mara to stay low as they crept closer. Through the trees, they saw a group of armed men standing near a black SUV, the same SUV that had taken the stolen goods the night before. They're waiting for us, Mara whispered. Ian's eyes narrowed. Then we'll give them a surprise they won't forget. Ian crouched behind a tree, the briefcase of cash still strapped securely to his back. Beside him, Mara scanned the group of armed men through the scope of her rifle, her expression cold and calculating. They're packing military-grade hardware, Mara whispered. Looks like the buyer wasn't planning to play fair. Ian nodded, his jaw tightening. We need to take them out quietly. No point in running if they can track us. And if they've got more reinforcements? Mara asked. Then we improvise, Ian replied. Back in the forest, Devon and Clara were navigating a parallel path, each carrying part of the gear. Devon was on edge, his eyes darting around at every sound. You think Ian and Mara are okay? Devon asked. Clara adjusted the strap of her bag, her expression stoic. If anyone can handle this, it's them. We just need to stick to the plan. And what's your plan if we run into those guys? Devon pressed. Clara glanced at him, a faint smirk on her lips. Don't miss. Near the clearing, Ethan had taken a different route, but ended up closer to the ambush than he'd intended. He crouched low, listening to the conversation between the armed men. Boss wants this wrapped up quick, one of them said. Get the money, clean up the loose ends, and we're out. What about the crew? Another asked. Take them out if they resist. No witnesses, the first man replied. Ethan's blood ran cold. He silently cursed himself for splitting from the group. Ian and Mara moved closer to the clearing, staying low and using the terrain for cover. Mara picked her first target, a man standing near the SUV, holding what looked like a communications device. Take out the radio guy first, Ian whispered. We can't let them call for backup. Mara nodded, adjusting her aim. She exhaled slowly and squeezed the trigger. The shot was muffled by the silencer, and the man dropped without a sound. Ian moved quickly, slipping through the underbrush toward the SUV. He reached the vehicle just as one of the armed men turned to investigate. Before the man could react, Ian struck him with the butt of his rifle, knocking him out cold. Back in the forest, Ethan realized he needed to act. He drew his pistol, keeping it steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. You've got this, he muttered to himself. He fired twice, hitting two of the armed men before diving behind a fallen log for cover. The remaining men shouted, their attention now split between Ian's team and Ethan. Devon and Clara heard the gunfire and froze. That's gotta be them, Devon said. Clara nodded, pulling out her sidearm. Let's flank them. Keep them guessing. The two moved quickly but carefully, closing in on the clearing from the opposite side. In the chaos, Ian and Mara took advantage of the distraction. Ian grabbed a grenade from one of the fallen men, pulled the pin, and tossed it toward a cluster of the buyer's people. The explosion sent dirt and debris flying, disorienting the remaining men. Mara picked them off one by one, her shots precise and unerring. Ethan joined Ian and Mara as the firefight died down, his face pale but determined. Nice of you to join us, Mara said, reloading her weapon. Had to make my entrance, Ethan replied with a shaky grin. Devon and Clara arrived moments later, surveying the carnage. Everyone okay? Devon asked. We're fine, Ian said. Let's make sure we stay that way. As the team regrouped, Ian searched the SUV and found a satellite phone. He handed it to Clara, who quickly disabled it. No more calls for backup, Clara said. Ian nodded. Good. Let's grab what we can and get out of here. The team loaded the briefcase and their remaining gear into the SUV. Ian took the driver's seat with Mara riding shotgun. What's the plan now? Mara asked. We stick to the original plan, Ian said. Head to the safe house, lay low, and disappear. And the buyer? Ethan asked from the back seat. Ian's expression hardened. They'll get what's coming to them. As the SUV sped away from the ambush site, the team allowed themselves a moment of relief. The heist hadn't gone as smoothly as planned, but they were alive, and they had the money. Devon leaned back in his seat, letting out a long sigh. I don't know about you guys, but I'm done with this line of work. Clara smirked. We'll see how long that lasts. Ethan chuckled. He says that after every job. Mara glanced at Ian, her expression thoughtful. You think we'll actually get away this time? Ian kept his eyes on the road. We just did. The SUV disappeared into the horizon as the first light of dawn broke over the landscape. For Ian and his team, the heist was over, but their story was far from finished. Would their lives of crime catch up with them, or had they finally found a way to outsmart the odds for good?